Great. And you're going to post the recording? Okay, awesome. So let me bring up the doc here. Apologies, we're running a little bit late. Last meeting with 80% of the same people ran over just a little bit. So we didn't have any follow-ups from previous discussions or have anything new to demo, which is okay. Is that accurate? That's what the agenda says. Going once. Sold. Okay, so issues for planning breakdown, turning Cilium on and off. I know Sam and Arthur, there's good comments in there. Sam, you want to give the overview of that? No, Arthur is not here. Maybe not yet. I don't know if he could make it today or not, but why don't you give the team the overview if you would?
Yeah, Arthur's on, it looks like. So, yeah, last week, Arthur and I had a discussion with one of the engineers from the configure team, and basically the short summary is that the UI there is staying in managed apps for Kubernetes. What they're really just changing is how it works with the backend. So it's going to be connected a little bit more seamlessly with V2 of managed DevOps, so that, you know, they're just connecting the two so that they don't have two separate solutions, even though they're keeping the UI on the front end. In further discussion, essentially it was brought up that, you know, the steps to enable or disable Cilium are rather complex, and it also involves restarting all of the pods, which likely is going to be more than we want to go and do on behalf of the user, because if something goes wrong, you know, it's going to be difficult for them to troubleshoot there in the UI unless we, like, you know, build like a full-fledged solution where we're exposing all of the error logs to them and giving them feedback and showing them all of the commands that we went and run. And at the end of the day, it may just be easier to let them run the commands themselves. I also updated the description to show the goals of this one. So one, we do want some kind of a UI because we want this feature to be discoverable. Right now, Cilium is in the product, but it doesn't have any UI anywhere, so it's not discoverable unless you happen to be following our release posts or you happen to read our documentation. And we also want it to be easy to turn off. So I proposed, I can share my screen here, 2 potential solutions in there, different routes that we could go. I guess, Andy, it would kind of be up to your discretion on how to approach this. I'd love to hear your thoughts on if we, you know, do we remove the install and uninstall button and just put in some text in the description area that links to the documentation, or would it be better to keep the install and uninstall button, you know, keep that prompt that you proposed, and then, you know, give them like a list of commands to go run on their own in Kubernetes? Is there a preference between the two, or does anyone have a strong opinion one way or the other?
Yeah, I'm open to opinions on this. It's a challenge. I think one seems like probably the easiest opportunity to get something of value shipped without creating kind of a broken experience, in my opinion, because I don't think there's anything on that screen that mirrors either 1 or 2's behavior today. I'm almost hesitant to say, like, maybe we, again, like, put those instructions in the docs and link them to it and let them know that Cilium is installed or has been uninstalled in the UI. But I don't want to, you know, put instructions inside of like a modal, because you imagine trying to like use your CLI and having a modal up and then resizing windows and trying to like juggle instructions and typing commands could be a challenge.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I can definitely see pros and cons to each of them. I think either, from my perspective, at least from a product perspective, I think both of those solutions meet the requirements. So I'm okay with either solution. Sounds, Andy, like you're leaning towards number 1.
Yeah, I might have to run this down. I'm gonna meet some people on the configure team, see if they have any conventions for this and something that we can steal and replace.
One thing that was brought during the discussion is the GitHub runner settings multiple times. I think they're under integration somewhere, but those are not working exactly the same. But maybe we'll give some ideas. And there was also brought during the discussion that things that we're adding for the Cilium doesn't have to align with what we have right now. Because what we have right now, while the whole screen stays, the way it will operate will be completely different. So UI is not going to be the same, most likely. So we can drive the innovation in some way for the screen by doing something ourselves. And I agree that documentation linking makes probably the most sense because we have quite a few settings that users might want to tweak, like audit settings and monitoring settings.
Sounds like I've got 2 votes for option number 1, with a caveat that Andy, you want to hunt down the configure team just to double check on that.
Yeah, I don't want to go in there and just start breaking all the rules that they've created and been following, and then we get kicked out of the configuration screen. We wouldn't, but you know, I want to make sure there's consistency.
So I would like to get this groomed and ready for the next release for 13.0.
Are you taking this
Granted,
one
we don't.
in terms of at least?
So that's one question I wanted to raise. I mean, if we've de-scoped it now to the point, it seems like we've almost de-scoped it to the point where it's almost just UI changes. I don't know, Lindsay, if what resourcing looks like, if this is more suitable for somebody on the front end at this point. But
we're sort of functioning full stack in this group right now. So Arthur or Zamir or anyone can argue with me if I have an incorrect understanding, but because both Arthur and Zamir, and I don't want to speak for you, Alan, have operated full stack before and have some view experience, that they'll be handling both front end and back end.
And where we're at on first class vulns, which is a 12.10 thing, not a 13.0 thing, but nobody on Lindsay's team, they're totally dedicated to the first class vuln stuff, which have a customer deliverable for 12.10. So I'd rather that that somebody on the container team take it because we can. So Arthur, I know you've been in and out of Cilium.
So yeah, this would be a 13.0 for sure, but
sure. Nobody would be ready to groom it until after 12.10 is shipped from Lindsay's team, I guess is what I'm saying. We probably want to groom it earlier at least. So
Yeah,
so
I think it's groomable at this state because state was reduced to a bare minimum. There is a small chance because I think it was discussed, I think Andy Brothers said it would be good to have a state at least. This is being worked on and it might be a possibility to get a state back on the screen in 13.0 because Tong is working on that right now. And there was some progress on that. But yeah, I can groom this one based on the description. I don't need UI for grooming.
Okay, that sounds great. So yeah, again, I see that as a nice to have, but I guess, Andy, if you could design for that experience where we do have information on whether Cilium's installed or not, that would be great. And I guess if we can't and we have to reduce that scope, then that's okay. I'm okay with that change if needed.
Okay.
Great. We're moving through these. So the last one, so I think we already got WAF metrics done and ready for grooming. So the only other one that we have for today's discussion is the Cilium metrics, getting this one all the way done and through and ready for grooming. I did meet with legal, explained all of the concerns in depth, and the conclusion was that our existing end user agreement and, you know, what we're already collecting falls in line. You know, like the fact that this is coming from their containerized environment still falls within everything that they've already agreed to. And so there really weren't any concerns there at all. Again, with the caveat and assuming that we're still reporting this up just as part of the normal usage ping, which I think usage ping is already anonymizing customer names and things like that. Like it uses a random identifier or some sort of like UID, customer ID in place of the customer name, things like that. So, you know, unless we start deviating wildly from the way usage ping works today and reporting the data up and anonymizing customers, the fact that it's coming from the cluster instead of from our like our database is not a problem to legal. So with that being said, I just wanted to see where we're at on the rest of these data points. Which ones are we still blocked on, and you know, what are those blockers?
Yeah, I did some technical investigation and just review of what we can and what we can't. So there are essentially two groups of metrics we need. One is Cilium's installation state, and one the packet filtering stats. For the state, we are a bit blocked. I mentioned it multiple times that we don't really have a state right now, but our orchestration group is working on that, and it might be shipped in this release, like the things that they're working on. So there are, I guess, two ways. We either get the state ourselves right now, or we'll wait for what they will implement. And I don't see a good way, at least a better way than orchestration group is doing right now, for us to implement the state collection out of the cluster application. So I would say it will be better to wait for them to finish this work, especially considering it being worked on right now. So it's next, is this our next
Do
release?
you have the
Essentially,
issue or issues
yes.
or MRs you could mark this as blocked by?
In my command under the challenges related to this issue, there is a link to the
Awesome.
issue that Ton is working on.
I'm not seeing that.
It's 35672, yeah, as Wayne mentioned, and there is direct link to the command.
Oh, and you've got it right there. Relates to, actually, so I'll mark it as blocked by 35672. It's not really, we could go a different route if we wanted to, but we don't want to. We'd rather wait for them to do this first, which is scheduled for 12:10.
Yeah,
So
if they're that close, I would rather wait for it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. So having said, is this assuming that we wait on that, which sounds like we're all in agreement on, is this groomable at this point?
I will need to see what Stonk is doing, honestly, before answering that. But I think it's doable. But there is a second group of metrics that we're discussing on the issue right now is packet filtering. The one concern I have about those packet filters is that those are highly dependent on the policies we deploy, and we deploy bare minimum a single like minimal policy by default if user wants it in and only in auto DevOps environments. So it's essentially bare minimum in terms of policies. Without those policies, deployment like dropping will not happen. So I'm just curious how useful right now to have those packet filters if we don't really have ability, like users don't really have effective ability to deploy policies rather than going and manually creating those and deploying those to the clusters.
So these two numbers should be identical to the ones that we're showing in on the statistics page. So the one is just the total amount of packets that we're analyzing, regardless of if we drop it or block it or not. And then the second one is how much of that is actually dropped. So really those two numbers should be identical to, again, what's shown here in the statistics page, volume-wise. So like 1.2 thousand in this example would be the number that should be reported up for the total number of packets that Cilium analyzed. I don't know if that helps or not.
Yeah, I agree, but I mean, in terms of collecting pink usage metrics. Like this UI is essentially a foundation of what we're going to do right now. And it makes sense to do that. But does it make sense to do the same for the metrics right now? Like push metrics that will not provide any value? Essentially because
So
we don't
help me
have a
understand.
foundation.
I think the total packet.
So with the minimal policy set, it still is going to be analyzing all of the packets that come
I think
across,
the
correct?
blocked packets, there'll be, unless the customer sets a policy, which we don't, which is not easy, will be 0. It's but the total
That's
packets,
that's what I'm talking about.
yeah. So
Right.
but we're going to have that in the future, and the total packets we do have now. Total packets processed. So maybe what we do is we cut the scope of this issue to not include drop packets. Maybe we make the database changes for it, but we don't add that yet until there's actually, we expect it, or we do it now, or we do it as part of this issue, but we know it's going to be very low, if not close to 0, until we make the policies easily configurable. Just knowing the number of total packets processed by Cilium is a lot of value. So we can see, how it's a good gauge of customer usage as a North Star metric.
Right. So this number still has value, right? And I would rather collect both of them. So I did change the North Star metric to focus on this total number rather than the dropped packet number. So even though I would like for us to collect both so that we can track it over time, the real focus is going to be on the total packet number, which should be independent of the policies that they deploy.
Yeah, I agree that, again, it can be a good investment in the future. I mentioned that in the issue, but at the same time, unless we're going to add some policy related features, the value of these metrics will be still low, and I'm not sure how, like, I obviously not a project manager. I'm just raising the concern that these metrics right now in this particular moment, from my understanding, they're really low value. And if you're interested in ability to see product activation, Cilium state-based metrics will help you to see that rather than collecting how many packets our users are forwarding through their cluster. But yeah, it's just a suggestion that you might not get.
So I just want to be super crisp on that. So is your concern around both of these metrics, or is it just the dropped packet metric that you're concerned about?
Both, essentially, because I see the value is here, is that Cilium does something, and by that I mean provide security features. And essentially, if we can't show that we are providing security features from these metrics, what's the value of those metrics?
I think we also want to start with knowing when at least customers are using Cilium and it's enabled.
Yeah, but this will be highlighted by the state-based metrics.
Right.
Discussed.
Yeah. And also listed in this issue is something we want to track. So your concern is until we provide the ability to modify policies, an easy way to modify policies, customers are not going to put in policies. The policies are what provide the security value. So we're putting perhaps putting the cart in front of the horse.
Yes.
If I may put my ops hat on here, I've managed operations infrastructure for a long time when I was at Westfield, and the total request alone would be an interesting metric. I would like to see that. It would tell me that Cilium is working, is seeing those packets go through. It would raise a question in my mind why I'm not seeing the other metric go up, and I think maybe Arthur, maybe that's one of your concerns. People will look at that. Why is it 0? And then they will have to dig further.
Just to clarify, those metrics are internal GitLab product metrics. We expose them for the admins on the cluster, but this particular, I think, interest right now is just about the product usage from our project manager perspective.
So
the question is, how do we in GitLab measure the success and usage of this feature?
Yeah. So with the concerns,
to answer what Sam saying, because it's an interesting topic. I think it's another thing that I mentioned on the issue that we don't do enough for the policies, and that's why we can't really do policies metrics. And I think policies are the cornerstone of this particular feature, and deployment of those is essentially highlight of the successfulness of the feature from my perspective. Because
So-
if users don't deploy it, they don't use it essentially.
So is it easier to
So,
do
I mean,
both
I
sets
agree.
of metrics? Sorry, Sam. Is it easier to do both sets of metrics at the same time when we implement it, in a set of MRs for on-off metrics and packet-based metrics, or should we perhaps do the on-off metrics as one issue, then work on policy configurability, another issue, then the ability to look at dropped packets, which will be dependent on the policy, and kind of do it that way. Is that kind of what you're advocating, Arthur? Or are you good kind of doing this as is, knowing
Yeah.
that policy metrics, policy configurability is going to come soon as well?
Yeah, what you said is correct. I think right now the Cilium state-based metrics makes the most sense because that's essentially what we have in terms of value. And then once we start adding additional features, maybe like next step, we'll be adding policies interface. And on top of policies interface, we will be able to roll policy-based like stats, let's say how many policies are user deploying, or if we will get a per default policies, how popular per default policies.
But I'd still want to get packets processed per policy, both dropped and total.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my perspective on this is that, we definitely are planning to add a policy UI down the road. And, I would rather get this all done while we're adding stuff to the usage metrics, like get as much done as we can. Plus then we can, then we start getting the data and we can even see how it changes over time, right? We've got a before and after. Whereas if we wait to measure this until after we've added policies, we're not going to have that before and after snapshot. We're just going to have the after data.
So it sounds like we're not going to, in the next 5 minutes, not going to come to a conclusion on this one. But maybe I'm fine, Sam and Arthur, with whatever you guys decide, as long as you guys come to an agreement on something on this. So maybe you guys take that offline, discuss it, and then come back to the group with what you guys agree on, what you don't, and then we discuss from there. Does that sound reasonable?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that works. That works.
So I know we've been talking a lot about Cilium. I added some of the agenda. So just, I don't know if you want to give a 1 minute update, Zamir, and separately Alan, on just what you've been working on. I think it'd be great to hear, because we're doing more than just Cilium related stuff, of course.
Alan, do you want to go first?
Okay, so I'm working on WAF statistics right now. So I have my first merge request is ready for, actually, I believe one last review needs to happen and it will be merged soon. So I've done like a week of going with all people related to the database, how to improve the query and where to fetch the data from, just to make sure that we have the proper data. So that's the first one, and I already have the second merge request that is waiting for the first one to be merged. And then the second one, I'm gonna have how many total packets are we going through WAFs and how many packets were anonymized, and that's it. So I truly hope to finish all of these this week.
Awesome.
Merged.
Awesome. Zamir?
And from my side, I have been working on exporting the logs from the containers to SIEMs using the Syslog protocol. So right now we have 3 PRs for the WAF part. That's going to have basically just the FluentD. We're going to be using FluentD with some external plugins to get the logs from the containers that we want to export using the Syslog. And that is going to be just a small change to add other containers as well, like Cilium. And yeah, and I have a couple of docs that I need to update for that.
Cool. Any questions for Alan or Zamir, or comments? Other than great stuff, great progress. So I think we can cover quickly time frame. So I put it, who tends to come to this meeting and what region of the world they are. So, lots of folks in, US and Canada, one person in EMEA and 2 in APAC. So, EMEA is Alan in Poland, and Arthur in New Zealand, and Tiago in Australia. It's really hard to find overlap between Arthur / Tiago and Alan, of course. One thing to do is, we keep it as is, because it's 7 a.m. your time, is that right, Tiago? Yeah, 7 a.m. your time, and Alan, I think it's 8 p.m. your time.
Sorry, it's 6 a.m. now.
6
I
a.m.
was nodding, but it's 6 a.m.
6 a.m. for you, Tiago, and Alan. What time is it for you?
It's right now it's 10 p.m.
10 p.m. Really late. So pretty early and really, really way too late. So one thing we could do is, and I don't like this idea, but we could do 2 meetings maybe each week, and then we catch everybody. Another way to do it is, because us in US and Canada, we can find time more easily that works for either group. Another way to do it is we change the time. We alternate times each week. So sometimes it's at a good time for Alan. Sometimes it's a good time for Tiago and Arthur. And people just contribute asynchronously, beforehand, comment on the doc, add questions that we address in the doc, live and in the doc, and then people read the notes and view the recording in advance. I kind of prefer the alternate the time thing rather than 2 meetings. But what does everybody think?
I like alternating for sure. I think it's fair for all the parties, because 2 meetings, people might start skipping. I know we can skip meetings, but it might be a little bit of context for a couple of people. More meetings are going to have more context than the other ones. That's my
I'm
thought.
actually for the 2 meetings, and based on what Secure does, I think it just will work better. Otherwise, we are not solving problem for anyone. I can't imagine how it will be for Tiago to wake up at 5 o'clock to just meet at the alternating meeting at the same time. Alan pushing already quite far with his time zone.
This meeting is not too bad. Doing a meeting at 5:30 a.m. is probably fine. The 5 a.m. one is worse, because then I got that mental block of waking up at 4. And I'm actually okay doing the second option, which is alternating the times. I wouldn't mind doing this once a week, once every 2 weeks.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm in a better state. It's 7 o'clock, 7:30 when meeting started. So
Yeah, I don't know if you're a morning or afternoon person. I'm a morning person, so 5:30 for me it's not too bad.
let's try alternating then. But yeah, I know that Secure does 2 meetings, but they have a bit more people in APAC.
Okay, so let's try the alternating and then see how it goes. So Tiago, why don't you edit the meetings? Make this one every other week. I guess an hour later than we started this one, and then one earlier in the day, maybe about roughly 6 hours before this one, which works for Alan and everyone in US and Canada.
Will do.
What you usually have to do is you can't make the meeting alternate in Google Calendar. I believe you have to have 2 separate meetings.
I'll have to create 2 meetings. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And then if it doesn't work, we'll figure it out. We'll experiment with that. And thanks, Alan, for being on at 10 p.m. That's thanks, but we shouldn't continue doing that. That's too late. And thanks for coming at 5:30 a.m. as well. So, okay. Awesome. I know we're a little bit over on time, but anything else we want to discuss?
I'm good, thanks.
Have a great day, everybody. Get some sleep, Alan.
Thanks.